Hello everyone, and welcome to our open source library at Q4D Lab. Today I'm going to be taking you through the topic differentiating variable types and producing descriptive statistics. Our lesson objectives for today include to characterize variables as either continuous or categorical, to apply appropriate error functions for generating descriptive statistics, and to interpret the results from descriptive statistics. Deciding whether variables are categorical or continuous. Why is it important that we are able to differentiate between a categorical variable and a continuous variable? One reason why this is important is because differentiating variable types helps you to identify the appropriate statistical test you want to use, especially in cases where you're interested in conducting bivariable analysis. Differentiating variable types also helps you to interpret data correctly, and it also helps you to identify the appropriate functions to apply in error to produce descriptive statistics. Now, there are two types of variables that we usually deal with in data sets. They are numeric or continuous variable and categorical variable. Now, let's talk about numeric variable. Numeric, numbers, right? So numeric variables are variables that take on numbers or values, right? And there are two types, continuous and count. Now, continuous variable, also called numeric variable, take on all real values within a given interval that is realistic for the variable. That is, values such as decimal, for example, 16.2, it could be, for example, height, weight. These are all measurements that take on real values. Count variables are variables that take on integer values, that is, whole numbers that are count of some quantities. Example of count variable will include the age in years of students enrolled in a biostatistics class, for example. The number of students enrolled in a class, for example, will also be a count variable. Say we will have up to 10, 20, 30, 40 students. So that is it for continuous variables. Now, categorical variables, on the other hand, are variables that take on discrete quantities or values. That is, they take on separate quantities or values. Think about it like the options for a multiple choice question, right? Categorical variable usually represent groups or categories instead of numbers. So you always find categorical variable having response level or factor levels. The two types of categorical variables include nominal. This is wherein the categorical variable has no natural order. For example, blood type, it could be A, B, or O. Gender could be male or female. Type of fruit could be mango, apple, orange, and what have you. There's no natural order. Just list out the levels or the response for the category variable. Now, ordinal variable, on the other hand, are categorical variables that have a logical order or ranking from smallest to largest, right? So, for example, you have education level. Education level follows a logical order: primary, secondary, and then university, postgraduate, etc. Customer satisfaction with a particular service: poor, fair, good, excellent. Pain level: mild, moderate, severe. These are all examples of ordinal categorical variable. Now let's take a practice test. Can you identify the variable types? Let's look at number one, country of birth. Country of birth, is this a continuous variable or a categorical variable? It is a categorical variable. What type of categorical variable is it? Because country of birth will take on separate values, right? Such as Nigeria, Liberia, etc., right? So what type of categorical variable? That's right, it's nominal because there's no natural order. Age in years. Yes, that's right, it is continuous. Marital status: single, married, divorced. Nominal or ordinal? Write that in the comments. Number of children in a household. Class grades. group by those who scored A, those who scored B, and those who scored C. Weight in kilograms. Type of medication, tablet, syrup, injection. Temperature in Celsius, continuous or categorical. Let me know your answer. Write that down. R functions to use to get descriptive statistics. Now let's talk about functions we can apply to numeric variables in R to produce descriptive statistics. Okay, so let me see this. Yes. Skip this slide. So there are functions we can apply to numeric variable in R that help us to produce descriptive statistics, which is the first step in analysis. Usually when you read an article, for example, in the results section, you first see a table. The first table there basically describes the characteristics of your participants or your respondents. So we use the class function first. The class function helps us to identify what type of variable we are dealing with, whether it's numeric variable, whether it's a factor variable. So usually when you run a class function in R, the output will either be integer, numeric. So when you see integer and numeric, it indicates that this variable is a numeric variable. Sometimes the class function will also give you an output such as character or factor, indicating that you are dealing with a categorical variable. So always apply the class function on all variables, whether they are categorical or continuous, to get confidence that you're actually dealing with categorical or continuous variable. Because we are dealing with numeric values, we could use the mean function. For example, if we are you dealing with the age variable, right? You want to know the average age of students enrolled in the biostatistic class. We use the mean to get the average value. We will also get the median, the standard deviation, the summary. So the standard deviation will give you the spread of the data. And then the summary function gives you a quick overview of all of the metrics for the continuous variable. So you have the minimum value, the maximum value. In the summary function output, you also see the mean and median, and then it gives you the IQ error, that is the first quarter and the third quarter. And you can also use the range to give you the minimum and the maximum. So let's apply this in R. In our previous video, we showed you how to create vectors. So now I want you to create a vector of 5 college students, ages 23, 21, 24, 26, 27. You can take a quick review of our previous video to get up to date. And I want you to assign the name age to this vector and produce some descriptive statistics. So let's do this in R. I'm just going to copy this. You can pause the video and create vector. So you want to open a new script. Yes, they say here. So the first step is to create a vector, and then we use the less than minus sign to assign the name age to this vector. Let's run this. So we have run it, and then we can print. You can either print age or you could just type age directly and run. So you see that the ages of the 5 college students are 23, 21, 24, 26, and 27. So remember we said that there are functions in R that we can apply to our variable, right? And we said we should use the class function to identify the type of variable we are dealing with. So when you look at the output of the class function here in the console, it tells you that age is a numeric variable. Easy, right? Exactly. So we could use the mean also, the mean function, to know the average age of students. So we see the average age of students is what? 24.2, right? So we will write that down. We use the hash to make annotations in our script. The average age students is 24.2 years. And then we could use the median as well. Get the median age. The median age for the 5 college students is 24. And then remember we said we can use the summary function. So the summary function now, let's look at the output. So you see the output here, it gives you the minimum age of students enrolled in the biostatistics class. It gives you the maximum age. It also gives you the mean and the median, right? So just by using the summary function, you no longer have to use the median and the mean function separately. So when do we report? Now that we see from the summary function, we see median, we see mean, we see minimum. What do we report, or when do we report the mean? When do we report the median? Stay tuned for our next video and we'll answer that question. Let's go back to our slides. Now let's talk about categorical variables. So remember we said that categorical variables are variables that usually take on separate quantities or values, right? So when we are producing descriptive statistics, we want to make sure that we are reporting for each of those quantity or factor level. So what do we report for descriptive statistics for categorical variable? We usually report counts in percentages. That is, we want to report the frequency that each level occurs. For example, if you are reporting on gender, you want to know the total amount of females and males responding or males that are in the classroom. And you also want to give the percentage of male and female enrolled in the classroom. So yes, the function we use for categorical variables is we use the class function also. Remember, we said the class function will give you confidence that yes, I'm dealing with a factor variable or categorical variable. So we also apply the table function to give us counts for each factor level, and then we apply the product table to give us relative frequency or proportions or percentages of the counts for each factor level. So let's practice now. For the 5 college students, let's assign gender, right? Let's assign gender to these 5 students. So I want to also go back in arrow and create a vector for gender for male, female, female, male, and male student, and assign gender to that vector. So you can pause the video and do that, and then we can apply the appropriate functions in arrow. So let's do this here. So gender, we create our vector. So you see here, because we are dealing with letters or characters, we usually use quote, right? Quote, comma, quote, comma. So please ensure that you have this in quote exactly as you see them. And then we can use the less than minus function to assign the name gender. Let's run or print gender and see the output. So we see we have male, female, female, male, and male student. So let's apply the class function next. Class to gender. Let's see what type of variable is gender. It's a character, right? When you look at the output, it's a character. So we mentioned that the output for categorical variable will usually be factor or character, which also indicate that they are basically categorical variables. Okay, so let's apply the table function to gender. Remember, we said the table function gives us a count of each factor level. So gender here has 2 factor level, male and female. So we see that there are 2 females and there are 3 males. That's just a count. Then we can use the product table. So from our last video, we encourage you to copy and paste. This makes getting your work easier. So I'm just going to copy this entire row 12 and I'm going to paste it in my table here. And I can run that. So you see, it gives me the percentage, right? So to remove this one decimal, let me multiply by 100. You see, female is 40 and male is 60. So we can write that down. The number of females, or we can say there are two constituting 40% females and three constituting 60% males enrolled in Biostats class. So this will be our brief interpretation, right, for the descriptive statistics. Now also go back, see that we did not use the standard deviation. Yeah, so we use the standard deviation and also get the spread of the continuous variable, which is 2.38. So again, we want to know when we can report the mean, when we can report the median, and we are going to explain that in our next video. But for our categorical variable, we always report counts and percentages. So let's do a quick review. There are two types of variable: continuous variable and categorical variable. Continuous variable are numeric variables. They usually take on values, numbers, while categorical variable usually represent groups, or they think about the options to multiple choice question. Examples of continuous variable include age, weight, temperature, income. Are all functions to use on continuous variable? Firstly, you want to apply the class function, or you could apply the mean, the median, the standard deviation, and the summary function to your continuous variable. The output you will get is the average, the spread, the minimum, maximum, summary statistics. These are what we use to produce or to interpret descriptive statistics, or to write out descriptive statistics. For categorical variable, examples include gender, blood type, education level, marital status, etc. We use the table function and the prop that table function to report counts and counts, proportions, and percentages. And then we also use the bar plot, which is a form of visualization. For outputs, for categorical variable, we see frequency, count, proportions, category distribution, and etc. So remember, when you are dealing with a continuous variable, use mean, median, standard deviation, summary. And if you are dealing with categorical variable, use prop that table. Thank you so much for watching our video. See you next time. Stay tuned and keep following us.